Welcome to the final episode of our Roanoke Island investigation. I'm your host, and today we'll piece together the latest evidence and expert insights to arrive at the most plausible explanation for America's oldest unsolved mystery. If you've been with us from the beginning, thank you for your dedication to uncovering the truth. If you're just joining us now, I encourage you to watch our first two episodes to fully understand this centuries-old enigma. In episode 1, we explored how 115 English colonists vanished between 1587 and 1590, leaving only the word CROATOAN carved into a post. In episode 2, we examined competing theories about their fate. Today, we'll reveal what modern research tells us likely happened to these lost souls. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to catch our next series of unsolved mysteries. For over 4 centuries, the fate of the Roanoke colonists has remained one of history's most enduring puzzles. But in recent years, a convergence of archaeological discoveries, historical research, and scientific advancements has finally begun to lift the veil on this mystery. Let's start with what many experts now consider the single most important breakthrough: the discovery of Site X. In 2012, researchers examining a watercolor map painted by John White, the colony's governor, made a stunning discovery. Using modern imaging technology, they found a patch on the map covering what appeared to be a fort symbol. This patch was located about 50 miles west of Roanoke Island, exactly where White had mentioned the colonists might relocate if necessary. Archaeologist Nick Lucchetti describes this moment. "We were blown away. This was the first new clue in centuries about where the colonists might have gone." Subsequent excavations at this site on Albemarle Sound near the confluence of the Chowan and Roanoke rivers yielded European pottery fragments, writing slates, and even part of a sword hilt dating to the late 16th century. But here's what's truly compelling. Historical records show this area was controlled by the Waipamiak tribe, whose chief was Manteo's mother. Remember Manteo? He was the CROATOAN chief who had been baptized as a Christian and maintained friendly relations with the English. Could this family connection have provided the colonists a safe haven? Then in 2015, archaeologists working at nearby Hatteras Island, home of the CROATOAN tribe, unearthed more evidence. A signet ring possibly linked to one of the colonists, a slate writing tablet, and a gold coin dated to the 1580s. Scott Dawson, author of The Lost Colony and Hatteras Island, explains, "These findings strongly suggest that at least some of the colonists relocated to Croatoan Island exactly as the carved message indicated. But if some colonists went to Croatoan and others to Site X, what does this tell us?" Dr. Arwen Bicknell, historian and author, puts it this way: "We're increasingly confident that the colonists didn't disappear as one large group. Instead, they likely split up, a common survival strategy when facing dire circumstances." This split colony theory aligns perfectly with both archaeological evidence and historical accounts. It explains why European artifacts have been found at multiple locations, and why later reports mentioned Europeans living with different native tribes. But the most convincing evidence comes from what happened in the years immediately following the colony's disappearance. When the Jamestown colony was established in 1607, just 17 years after Roanoke was found abandoned, Captain John Smith recorded something fascinating. The powerful Chief Powhatan told him that he had attacked and killed a settlement of Europeans wearing English clothes. Smith also heard rumors of European captives living with inland tribes. The timing and location match perfectly with where we now believe some Roanoke colonists may have relocated. Even more telling, when English settlers finally established a permanent colony in the Albemarle region in the 1650s, they encountered Native Americans who could already speak English and practiced Christianity. But perhaps the most compelling modern evidence comes from genetic research. The Lost Colony DNA Project has been collecting DNA samples from families with deep roots in eastern North Carolina. Their preliminary findings suggest that certain families carry genetic markers consistent with Elizabethan English ancestry mixed with Native American DNA families with surnames like Berry, Payne, and Locklear, who have lived in the region since before official English settlement, show these unique genetic signatures. Their oral histories often include claims of descent from the lost colonists. Ostowie Roberta Estes, founder of the DNA Project, cautions, We're still in the early stages of this research, but the genetic evidence is consistent with the theory that some colonists survived by integrating with native tribes. So what does all this evidence tell us? We can now piece together what most experts believe is the most likely scenario. Facing starvation during the severe drought of 1587 to 1590, the colonists made a planned, not panicked, decision to split up and relocate. One group, following their agreement with Governor White, carved CROATOAN to indicate they were heading to Hatteras Island to live with their allies. This explains the European artifacts found there and the later accounts of Native Americans with European features. Another group headed inland toward the Chowan River area, Site X, possibly seeking better agricultural conditions or to be closer to their originally intended destination in the Chesapeake Bay. This explains the artifacts found there, and potentially the settlers Powhatan later claimed to have attacked. A third, smaller group may have attempted to establish contact with Spanish settlements to the south, preferring potential capture to certain starvation. Dr. Malcolm Gaskell, historian and author of Between Two Worlds, suggests the colonists were not passive victims waiting to be rescued. They were resourceful people who would have taken action to survive. Over time, those who integrated with native tribes would have gradually lost their distinct English identity. Their children and grandchildren would have been primarily Native American in culture, even if they retained some European physical characteristics and fragments of English knowledge. By the time permanent English settlements were established decades later, the original colonists would have been dead, but their descendants, now primarily identifying as Native American, lived on. Utter, the mystery of Roanoke isn't so much a story of disappearance, but of cultural transformation and survival. But if this explanation is correct, why did it take so long to piece together? Part of the answer lies in our historical perspective. For centuries, European and American historians viewed the colonists' fate through a limited lens. Either they all survived intact as Europeans, or they all perished. The possibility of cultural integration was largely ignored. Colonial and early American reports of white Indians were often dismissed as tall tales or misidentifications. Indigenous oral histories were overlooked or disbelieved. But when we step back and consider the human reality of the situation, the integration theory makes perfect sense. People facing death will do whatever is necessary to survive. Cultural identity becomes secondary to survival. And the colonists weren't entirely unprepared for this possibility. John White had encouraged friendly relations with certain native tribes. The colonists had learned some native languages and survival skills. Cultural exchange was already happening. Dr. David LaVere, professor of Native American history, notes, "The line between English and Indian wasn't as sharp in the 16th century as we might imagine today. The colonists needed native knowledge to survive, and some native groups were interested in European technology and beliefs." So why didn't White find his colonists when he returned in 1590? The timing provides a crucial clue. By then, the colonists had been on their own for 3 years of severe drought and uncertainty. They'd likely already split up and relocated months or years earlier. Some were now living as integrated members of native communities. Others may have moved far inland. And yes, many probably died from disease, malnutrition, or conflict. White's brief search of Roanoke Island and his inability to reach CROATOAN due to a storm meant he never had a chance to find those who survived. But there's one final piece to this puzzle, a human element that's easy to overlook. Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, would have been 3 years old when White returned. She was White's granddaughter, and her fate has captivated the American imagination for centuries. What became of her? While we can never know for certain, the evidence suggests she may have grown up as a member of a Native American tribe, perhaps the CROATOAN or Weepameoc. If she survived to adulthood, she would have lived as a Native American woman, her English origins gradually fading into family lore. This possibility, that the first English child in America grew up as a Native American, is a powerful symbol of the complex cultural exchanges that defined early American history. As we conclude our investigation, I want to address one final question. Why does the mystery of Roanoke continue to captivate us after all these centuries? Perhaps because it speaks to something fundamental about the American experience, the uncertainty of new beginnings, the clash and blending of cultures, the thin line between success and failure in a challenging environment. The lost colonists weren't just historical figures, they were real people with hopes, fears, and dreams. They came seeking a new life and found challenges they never anticipated. Their story reminds us of the fragility of human endeavors and the remarkable adaptability of the human spirit. Troike, while we may never know with absolute certainty what happened to every individual colonist, the convergence of archaeological evidence, historical records, indigenous oral histories, and genetic research points to a complex but plausible explanation. They split up, relocated, and those who survived integrated with native populations. The colonists didn't simply vanish, they adapted, transformed, and in some cases their bloodlines continue in the people of eastern North Carolina today. The word CROATOAN wasn't a sign of tragedy, but a message of hope, an indication that they had found a path forward. As archaeologist Mark Horton puts it, the colonists didn't fail. They succeeded in a way we didn't expect by becoming something new. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Roanoke. Sometimes survival means transformation. Sometimes the line between disappearance and adaptation is simply a matter of perspective. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of America's most enduring mysteries. If you enjoyed this series, please like this video, share it with others who might be interested, and subscribe to Mysteries Uncovered for more investigations into history's greatest enigmas. Next week, we'll begin exploring another perplexing mystery that has captivated imaginations for generations. Until then, remember, the past is never truly lost. Sometimes its secrets are simply waiting for the right questions to be asked. This is Mysteries Uncovered. Thank you for watching.